Okay, so when we talk about Spark architecture, right? Spark architecture works in master-slave mode, right? So we have one master, right? Here we have one master, and we can have multiple slaves, right? S1, S2, S3. In Spark language, we call this master as driver program, right? So in Spark, master will call driver program, and these slaves will call as executors or worker nodes, right? So worker node is a physical machine. Inside worker node, we have executors running, right? So the master will be driver program. Executors will be your slaves. Executor will run on some physical machine, and we'll call that machine as a worker node, right? As simple as that. Now the thing is, when we submit a Spark program, whenever we are submitting a Spark program, how we will make sure that each executor, so basically how things work, let me open up one new notebook here. So let's say we have one master, right? So let's say you run a program for word count, okay? Word count program you run, and you submitted this program using a Spark context, right? So Spark context is nothing but your entry point to the Spark cluster, right? Spark context is nothing but your entry point to the Spark cluster. So now when you submit your program, how Spark cluster is making sure how many nodes or how many worker nodes, how many executors it needs to assign to this particular job. So let's say we are calling this job as let's say job 1, right? So we are calling this job as job 1. So how many executors we need to assign to this particular node or to particular job? So right, so what you do, you submit this job, you run the program. For example, so we have this program, right? So when we click this run new configuration into a local mode, so what Spark is doing behind the scene, Spark is creating some executors for us and running this job onto the Spark cluster. Into this case, it's a local cluster because it's running on a local machine. But what is going on behind the scene as of now, right? So what is going on, it has created some RDDs for us, right? It has created some RDDs for us, and then it did some action on those RDDs and it printed the result for us, right? So what Spark program did for us, first of all, it creates a DAG, right? It creates a DAG. DAG means RDD sequence, like which RDD generates from where, and then when we hit the action, it runs our program, right? So this is on the very high level, but what is going on behind the scene, when you click that green button into your local mode, what is going on, a driver program is created, right? So let's call this driver program as DP, right? Now this driver program will come to know how many resources are needed to run this word count program. So what it will do, it needs to talk to some resource manager, right? What this resource manager will be doing, resource manager will decide or will allocate resources for your job. So this resource manager, what it will do, it will then create executors for you, right? Executor 1, executor 2, and your this word count program dot scala, right? So this is Scala file. Then this Scala file in some format, into some byte format, will be transferred to each of the executor, right? And then this executor will run your logic, whatever you want to write, onto this local, and then the result will be transferred back to driver program. As simple as that, right? But behind the scene, a lot of other things are going on, right? So let's jump into details now. We know one thing, we all know one thing, that Spark is a unified or a generic computation framework which can run on any storage. So let's say, let's assume we are running this Spark framework as of now on your HDFS. So in your HDFS, what you have your name node, right? You have a name node, and then you have multiple data nodes, dn1, dn2, dn3, and then dn4, something like this, right? And let's say you have one file called, just 1 second, just give me a second, okay? Okay, so where are we? So basically, let's assume that your Spark is running on your SDFS. So in SDFS, what we have name node, data node, and multiple data nodes, right? So let's say we need to process one file. The file name, let's say, is hello.txt, right? Inside this file, I have multiple words. Or let's say you need to process one file called order.txt, because that's what I will be giving an example, right? So you have one file called order.txt, and your file will look like something like this. Your file will look like something like this, right? So let's say I just copy this file first, and let's say we have this file like this, right? So when we put this file onto SDFS, we know that this file will be distributed across different data nodes. So let's say part 1 or block 1 will go here, block 2 will go here, block 3 will go here, and there's some replication as well, right? So now our purpose is we need to calculate each order, how many times each order came. For example, in this particular example, complete came twice, right? So what we need to, into our Spark job, what we need to do? We need to have our result like complete, comma 2. And payment pending payment comes one time, so we need to have result something like this, right? So now we wrote our Spark program. So this is how we wrote our Spark program, right? And now we need to run, when we run this Spark program, what is going on? So whenever we run our Spark program, let's say we call our Spark program as order count dot Scala or something, right? SC. So when we submit this Spark program, what is going on? So we have our Spark cluster, right? And every data node will have some data stored onto that. So in this case, the first block is on DN1, the second block is on DN2, DN3 is block 3. So, and let's say we have Spark cluster here. So when we talk about Spark cluster, I already told you that Spark cluster means two things: your master program, which is called driver, and your executors, right? So let's say your driver is running on, here. Driver can run anywhere. So let's say in this case, driver is running on this. So we have this driver node, right? So let's say we submit the program, order count Scala. Now, how driver will come to know where your block 1, block 2, and block 3 are of this order.txt file? So what it gonna be doing? So it will first talk to the name node, right, internally, right? So here you have resource manager, that is your yarn for timing. Let's say your Hadoop cluster has yarn resource manager, which I'll cover in 2 minutes. So what your driver will do, driver to run the job, right, it will need n number of resources. What are those n number of resources? It will need, first of all, it will need the data. The second thing, it will need the CPU. The third thing, it will need some memory, or maybe some hard disk. So it will need 4 types of resources. So to run any job, it's nothing to do with Spark or Hadoop. You will need 4 types of resources, even 5 types of resources. You will need some data to process. You need some CPU. You need some memory, and then you will need some network bandwidth, right? So what driver will do? Driver will talk to yarn, right? And with yarn, what it will say? Okay, yarn, I need to run this particular program. I need to run this particular program to count number of orders in this particular file, right? So what yarn will do? Since yarn means what? Yet another resource negotiator. So yarn is yet another resource negotiator. So what yarn will do? Yarn on the behalf of driver. So driver is working on behalf of us, means client. Then driver will talk to yarn to get all the resources. Then internally yarn will do a lot of things for you, right? So what yarn will do? Yarn will, when you say order.txt, yarn will internally talk to name node, right? It will bring, okay, this order.txt file has 3 blocks, v1, b2, b3. They are stored on d1, d2, d3. So your data is done. Now let's say we, as a programmer, you know that this file is 1 GB, the volume of this file is 1 GB, right? And you need to process it, you will need 2 executors. So you can decide as a programmer that, okay, we will need 2 executors, we will need 1 executor, or if you don't give any executor number, then there is default parameter. So let's say you want 2 executors, right? You ask your program to run this job into 2 executors, let's say. So what Yarn will do, Yarn will create 2 executors or 2 containers. So what Yarn will do, it will create 2 containers onto your this container 1, and here it will create container 2. So what we are seeing here, that Yarn on behalf of driver will create some containers. And what containers in reality is, container is a virtual environment which will process data for you guys or for your Scala program, right? So this container will in turn will be having executor. So this obviously container means your machine. You can run any program onto the container, but in terms of Spark, you will be running your executor. So let me delete this full file again. So now coming to Spark again. So you will have your driver now. You will have your resource manager. You will have your containers now, right? So you as a client, let's say you are here, you submit your word count.scala. It will go to driver, right? It will go to driver. And when you submit this word count.scala, either as a programmer, you can tell the cluster how much resources you need, or if you skip those settings, cluster will decide, or this or some configuration will decide how much default executors, how much memory, how much RAM, whatever needs to be assigned to this particular program. Okay, so when you go to the driver, then by some configuration, driver will come to know that, okay, this program will need this many resources. Then it will talk to the resource manager. Let's say resource manager can be anything. Into our case, let's say it is Yarn, right? So driver will talk to Yarn. What Yarn will do, how Yarn works behind the scene. So let's jump to Yarn for 2 minutes. How Yarn works, whenever any request come to Yarn, Yarn will first create an application master, right? Yarn will first create an application master on any node. So let's say we have D1, we have 4 nodes, right? D1, D2, D3, and D4, right? So Yarn will first create the application master on D1, let's say, right? And then what this application master will do, application master on behalf of driver will negotiate all the resources. Let's say we need 3 containers. So what Yarn application master will do, application master will go to Yarn again, and okay, it will ask for 3 containers. Now, since this Yarn or your resource manager will have all the mappings, which data node or which node is having how many resources. So let's say you ask for, this application asks for 2 GB RAM, right? And it asks for, let's say, 4 cores. So this particular mapping or this particular information is stored somewhere into the Yarn memory. So when application master tell, okay, I need 2 GB 4 core 2 containers, right? 2 containers of this particular configuration, right? So what Yarn will do, Yarn will create this container onto some data nodes where this is available. So let's say in Yarn, it is mentioned that on D1 and D2, this particular resources are already available. So what it will do, it will create a container 1 here and container 2 here, right? So the container has created now. Now this thing is done, right? So now what driver will do, now driver will not talk to this. So driver won't talk to Yarn, driver won't talk to application manager. The application manager or application master will always communicate to Yarn. What driver will do, driver will send this particular copy of the code right? This particular copy of the code, not in the plain Scala format, but what driver will be doing for you. So in Spark, you have two things, right? One is transformations, and another one is action, right? And we know whenever we do any transformation on any data, it will create a RDD. Whenever we do an action on any RDD, it will create some local variables or some local result, right? So what Spark will do, whenever it receives any transformation, it will create a DAG for you, right? DAG means what? And again, I have covered this in a lot of detail in the previous lecture, but I'm just covering just to give the holistic picture for you guys, right? So let's say you first read the file for word count. You read the file, that's your RDD1, right? This is reading. And RDD2, you just filter some records, RDD, or you can say here, RDD1 dot filter, something like this. So this is your transformation, right? Then you created a new RDD, RDD3 is equal to, let's say, RDD2 dot some mapping. And then you just do one thing on RDD3, you call some reduce by key, or you call some count, simple. Let's say you call count, right? You call some count. So what is going on? This is transformation, this is transformation, this is transformation, and this is action, right? So when you submit this program, so this is what you wrote into your Scala files, right? This is what you wrote into your Scala file. What driver will do behind the scene, it will create a DAG, something like this. RDD1, then it create RDD2, then it create RDD3, and then some action is called on it. So this is what your DAG is, right? So this is your DAG. Now what driver program will do, driver program will submit this DAG or some format of this DAG to each of the data nodes. So what driver will do, this DAG will be go to container, this DAG will go to container here, right? So the DAG will be going to container. Now since we have on the D1 or D2, we have blocks here, D1, D2, right? Now we know that, okay, we need to count number of words, we need to this transformation, this transformation, this transformation, and then we need to give result back to the driver, right? So we have driver will talk to Yarn will create an application master for you. Application master will create containers on your behalf. Containers will have executors running into them. Those executors will be supplied with your DAGs, which will be the copy of your code. And then these containers or executor will talk directly to driver. They never talk to Yarn, they never talk to application master, they never talk to anyone. So they will directly communicate with driver. Okay, makes sense, right? So till now everything is super clear, I think, right? So let's jump into theory now. So obviously this is how it works, but let's jump here and let's go into more formatted way, right? So we have driver program, then we have cluster manager. So cluster manager, so what Spark says, right? So what Spark says that, guys, I can use any cluster manager. I am generic computing framework. If you give me Yarn, I can use Yarn. If you give me Mesos, I can use Mesos. If you give me Kubernetes, I can use Kubernetes. So I am cluster manager agnostic, right? So this cluster manager can be anything. So it can be Yarn, it can be Mesos, it can be anything, any cluster manager which is available in the market, right? Now, one more thing which you see here, driver program is the main class, right? Driver program is the main class for your program. Now, what is Spark context, right? So in the driver program, you have your Spark context running for you. Now, what is Spark context? I told you Spark context is a door which allow you to use this particular cluster, which allow you to run your code into Spark cluster, right? But in reality, Now let's jump into one step ahead. So what Spark context is, it is the context of the job what you are running on the Spark cluster. Now what context means, your which block is getting processed on which executor has completed the job, which executor has failed, which executor is running slow. So this all information is somewhere stored into Spark context. And that's where to use a Spark cluster, you need to create this Spark context first. You need to create this Spark context first, because Spark context will have all the information stored about your job. So first you will create a blank Spark context, and gradually when you write your RDDs, you write your transformation, this Spark context will be updated behind the scene for you guys, right? So you submit your main program, right? You submit your main program, which has Spark context into it, to the driver program. So here you are, right? Let's say here you are, you have your laptop open, and then you run your word count program, which has main program into it. It will go to Spark context. What Spark context will do? Spark context will talk to the cluster manager, right? And now when you submit your program, either you can mention how much resources you need to run the program, or how much resources, if you don't mention anything, there's default configuration which will decide how much resources needs to be allocated to this particular job. On basis of this cluster manager, what it will do, it will create the containers which behind the scene will run executors for you on the worker node. What these worker nodes are in terms of HDFS, they are data nodes, right? So this is how it works. Now let's jump one more step ahead. So I will cover this yarn in a lot of detail, but let's jump one step ahead, right? So when we talk about executor, so each executor, okay, let's talk for the Spark context first. So for each program, for each main class, there is one Spark context created for you. For each Spark context, there can be multiple executors can create for you. So these executors, what they have created, they will be for the full lifetime of this particular application, right? So they will be for here till the lifetime of this particular application by default. We can change it, or if you want, but by default they will be here for the lifetime. This executor will communicate directly with the Spark context to and fro. They will send the heartbeat, they will send the results, they will send everything to the Spark context, right? Let's say if they have done the work, they will tell the Spark context, okay guys, boss, my work is done, right? And the cluster manager will take care of creating these executors on driver's behalf. Driver will work on our behalf, on the programmer's behalf, right? And the cluster manager obviously is agnostic. We can use any cluster manager. Okay, I have covered cluster manager in detail, but basically what Spark says, it can use standalone cluster. So these are cluster manager types, right? So what Spark says, that to manage resources of the cluster, you can use any cluster manager, standalone, Apache Mesos, Yarn, Kubernetes. I will be covering Apache Yarn in detail because obviously that's the most important one, and that's where most of the people are using Yarn in production, right? I can cover in Kubernetes, but maybe in later lectures. But here we'll be covering Yarn in 2 details, right? So again, the same thing is written here. So Spark driver program runs the main function of the application and is the place where Spark context is created. The Spark driver contains various components, that is DAC scheduler, task scheduler, and some kind of scheduler, right? And the driver program that runs on the master node of the Spark cluster schedules the job execution and negotiates the resources with the cluster manager, right? It translates the RDD into the execution graph, which we call as DAG, right? Driver stores, and now the most important thing, driver stores the metadata of RDDs and their partitions, right? And driver exposes the information about the running Spark application through Web 4040. I'll be covering this, but this is what driver is doing for you guys, right? Now, the most important thing, since Spark is a distributed framework, so what going on behind the scene, there's something called data locality. So obviously, let's say we are using Yarn. Yarn is running on HDFS. There is some name node which has your data information. So behind the scene, cluster manager will be talking to Jan. Sorry, your driver program will be talking to cluster manager. Cluster manager will talk to maybe to name node. Name node will give you some information about data nodes, where data is stored. And that's how it will decide where this, on which data nodes, these worker nodes to be created. So let's say if your word count.txt file is stored on multiple data nodes, then it will create these driver containers onto that nodes, right? So everything is very, very interconnected. Okay. Now, what is cluster manager is doing? Obviously, cluster manager is negotiating resources for you guys or for the driver program. It will give you CPU, memory, and it will create the containers for you guys, right? And now, when we launch the Spark program using your single script, the Spark program can be launched in two ways, right? The first and the easiest way is when you go here and when you type Spark shell, this is the first way of launching your Spark program. This is called the interactive way of launching the Spark program. So when it runs, right? Let me expand it for you guys. So when it runs, it will automatically create a Spark context for you guys. It will be automatically creating in 2 minutes, okay? And the other way of running the Spark program is, okay, you need to create. So let's say if I have this Spark program, right? If I have this Spark program and I need to run. So how industry works? Let me take one step back. So how in an industry things work? You will be developing everything on your machine, right? And then you will be writing each and every logic here into your local. And now you need to deploy this code into the Spark cluster, or you need to run this code onto the Spark cluster, right? For testing, you can have the test data like this. But in reality, so let's say if this test data is 1400 rows, but in reality, these rows can be 14 million. So let's say what you guys make sure that if this program is running on 1400 line, ideally this should run on 14 million lines as far as all the resources to run the program will be present, and how we are making sure resources are present. And that's where we are going for the distributed computing, right? So what we do here, we go here to run this program onto the cluster. We'll go here and then we'll go here. We'll say export, right? And then we'll go jar, and then we'll go to jar file. Then we go next, and then we can give any jar file. Let's say we want to give this jar file is my jar file, right? And then we'll say finish. Now we have one jar file, right? Now what we need to do, we need to push this jar file onto our cluster, right? And then we need to run our Spark submit. Okay, so let's go here. So what we have done here, so the first mode was interactive mode. In interactive mode, what Spark did for us, Spark created a Spark context for us here. See, so when we go SC, so it will create automatically a Spark context for us. Yeah, so it has created one Spark context for us, right? So now what is going on whenever we run this program, this Spark context will be used to store the metadata on your behalf. So right, this is interactive mode. And let's say when we are willing to run this program, what we run written onto our local. So I don't know where I've stored it. Just 1 second, guys. So we'll go for jar file again, and I'll just download this jar file to, let's say, desktop and save it. Let's say I'll name it test. I do the jar file and I'll say finish, right? So when I go to my desktop, I have one, so I have one test jar file created. So now to run this jar file on Spark cluster, what we need to do, we need to copy this jar file onto the Spark cluster. I'll show you later. But how to run this, right? So what we need to do, we need to run a command called Spark submit. It's a very, very simple command, So into our case, what we're gonna be doing, we're gonna be onto the command shell, what we're gonna be doing, we will write Spark -submit, right? So this is what we need written. Then we need to write the main class. class. So into our case, what is our main class? So we'll go here, clearly see that our main class name is test, right? So our main class name is test. So let's say our main class name is here. I'll put here test, right? And what is our master? So master means what is your resource manager, right? What is your resource manager? So master, I can say in my case, let's say Jan, right? I was talking to you guys about the configuration. So these configuration are all about, let's say, if you want to have number of executors, if you guys want to have other things, then you can put here. The most important thing is application jar. So we have created the application jar. So let's say we have put that application jar into temp folder onto your cluster. So what you're going to be, you'll be putting temp, then test.jar. So when you run this Spark Submit, this will go to your driver program. And since inside this program, what we have written, we have created this code, right? We have created this code. Inside this code, we have created the SC, this one, the Spark context. So now it will be knowing that, okay, we need to run this inside Spark cluster using this Spark context, right? So when I run Spark Submit, it will find SC here. It will run the main class inside this driver program. Driver program will talk to Jan. Jan will see all these configurations, right? And then it will create the containers for you guys. Container 1, container 2, container 3. And then this jar will be transferred across these containers in some way. And then the result will be transferred back to driver program. And then you can see the result, right? Now, one more thing. When I'm running this program, I'm seeing the result on my local, on my console. It means my driver program, since this is a one node cluster, it's a pseudo cluster, what is going on inside when I'm running this code, right? So when I'm running this code, what is going on, since this is my local cluster, here driver and executor are on the same machine, right? So when I go here, when I go here, in this particular case, I have my, in fact, let me delete it. So in this particular case, when I'm running my code in my local, what is going on? So I have my driver program here. So this is my laptop, right? This is my laptop, right? And I'm running this program into Scala ID, right? The Scala ID. In this Scala ID, I have written my Scala code. And when I play the, when I press the play button, what is going on? This particular program will go to driver program onto the master node, and then it will create some, it will talk to some resource manager, right? And it will create some container. So in this particular case, when I'm running it my local, everything is on my local, and that's why I can see result on my local, because I can see result on the driver program in most of the cases if we run it, right? And this is why I can see the result in driver program. Okay, now let's jump one more step ahead. So till now we are good, right? So now one more thing which is very, very interesting. Let me show it to you. So when I'm running this program, right? So what is going on, this particular thing which I was talking to you guys, that driver exposes the information about running a Spark application through web UI at port 4040, right? So let's talk about local thing first. Since I'm on local, if I run local host 4040, so it means all the information about the driver program will be here, right? Will be here. So what I did, so there are three things in Spark: job, stages, and task, right? So on the first page, you can see the jobs. And what we can see in job, there's something written at for each at test Scala on 18th line, right? So let's go to my program now. Let's go to line number 18. So this is where line number 18 is. right? So what job is saying, like what is written onto the Spark UI, that okay, on line 18 you have called for each, you have called for each. Now let's go to one more step back and let's go here. And what we can see, that what is for each? For each is an action. For each is an action. So what we can conclude, that whenever we hit an action, one job is created for you. So actions is directly proportional to number of jobs. As simple as that, right? So when we go here, we can see one job. Let's click this one job. What we can see here, let's go to DAG visualization. So I have told you guys, right, that what driver program is doing for you, it will do everything what you have written into your code, and it will convert that code into DAG. DAG means directed acyclic graph, right? So let's click DAG. What this DAG is showing you, that first you read a text file, then you did some filtering, and then you perform some action. So when you perform the action, this DAG is created for you. Now I have told you three things, right? Let me snipe this thing for you guys there. 1 second. So let's put this here. Okay, let's put it here, right? So what I was doing, I read the text file, then I did some filtering, and let me compare it with code. I will copy my code here. I'll copy the code here. Okay, so let's compare one by one. So what I did into my code, these lines are about Spark, sorry, not this. Till here, I just created Spark context. So this is nothing. I just created Spark context. Then what I did, I first read the text file. This line is all about text file. And this is where it created the RDD, right? The first RDD is created. Then what I did the filtering, right? I did some filtering. See here, filter here. That's where it is mapped here, right? And then I did some action. Where is my action? My action is somewhere here. This is my action. For each is action, so I did some action, right? So what driver program did, it created a DAG. It created some steps into my DAG. So this is my RDD1. It is my RDD2. And when I hit the action, it executes it. Okay. So this is going on behind the scene. This is how your code is converted into DAG, right? As simple. So now when we go here, so let's go one more step ahead. And if you want to dig down further, it will tell you in a lot of detail, right? So what we did, we read order.txt, it will give you the file name, right? On order.txt, we did the mapping with the filter. We did filter, right? And then it will show you how much time it take. Like for example, your job has been completed in this many seconds. Your task, like let's say you have 50 tasks, 25 percentile of your task is completed in 1 millisecond, 1 second, whatever. It will show you a number of details. Now, where your driver is running, into my case, my driver is running here. And it take the task time as 4 seconds. The total number of tasks are 2, and the succeeded tasks are 2. And this is what the data has been processed. Input size is this, number of records is this, right? And clearly, when we go here into my program, everything maps. It is not doing any rocket science. So these records are 511 in number, right? So the same thing, and the size of this file order.txt is in some KBs. So when we go here, it is showing me exactly the same thing. It just put everything onto the on one page for us, right? Let's go here. Now the question arises, why it created 2 tasks for us? So first thing is clear that okay, action is directly proportional to number of jobs, right? Now, before I jump to task, one more thing is the stages. So when we go here, we have stages here. So we can see stage 0, right? So what is going on behind the scene? Whenever we run any action, right? Actions are divided into two types of action, or transformation have divided into two types of transformation. Let's jump here. So everything is interrelated, right? So transformations have been divided into two types of transformation. So the first type of transformation were narrow transformations. In these kind of transformations, you do not need to shuffle your data across partitions. It means, let's say you need to do some filtering or you need to do some mapping. The data available for filtering and mapping should be available on each partition, is available on each partition. So you do not need to shuffle data across partitions, right? So it means if you are running any narrow transformation means if your data is available on that particular partition, and if you need to, let me explain further. So let's say if you want to filter the one number from each partition, right? So if I run filter on each partition, let's say F, and I need to filter one, what do you guys think? Do this F is equal to one function needs to go to any other partition? It will find the required data for filtering here, right? It will find the required data here. It will find the required data here, right? And that's where filter is a narrow transformation. But let's say if I ask you to count number of ones on each number of words on each of the partition. So what it gonna be doing? It gonna be count is not the correct example. Let's say if I need to let's say count, right? If I need to count number of ones on each partition, so what it's gonna be doing? It will count one here, it will count one here, it will count one here. At some point of time, maybe it will not found one proper one here. It may need to jump to other partition, and that's where the data needs to be moved from one partition to another. And this is what we call shuffling, and this is what is going on in white transformation, right? The data moved across different partition. So if your transformation is narrow, then everything will be done in the same stage. As soon as you put some white transformations like reduce by key, group by key, joining, right, in which you need to shuffle the data across different partition, a new stage is created. Into our case, only one stage is created. Why? Because we never used any white transformation. Let's do one thing quickly. So let's do this for each. In fact, and then let's do this. I'm just doing one thing, split, and let's do this thing, right? Let me stop this first and let me run it. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to run some okay, and let's see. So we'll go here, we'll go for localhost 4040 again, and what it's see here, no, it's not refreshed yet. Okay, let's see quickly. Yeah, so I've done the for each, and then let's see. So we'll go here and then click this action. In fact, let's do one thing. Oh, it failed. It failed. Just 1 second. Okay, so it failed because of this. 1 second, guys. So split, and then 1 second. Let's see quickly. So it is saying that your is out of context, right? So it is showing array out of bound index. So I need to see why it's not running. Let me see quickly. 1, 2, 3. Let me run quickly. So I'll see order underscore filter. let's see. Okay, so what we are doing here. Okay, I know what's the issue here. So I did some mistake here. So when we see here, right? See, this is a perfect example, right? So what I did here, I was doing one thing here. Where was that? Oh, here, right? Here it was written 3. Right here it was written 3. So what I was doing in my program, I need to copy this word and I need to put 1 after each word, right? So what I was doing, let me explain this program because obviously this is very important thing. So I have some lines like this, right? So, and I converted this program into array, right? I converted this program into array. How I converted it? I tell my program, whenever you find a comma, add 1 element to the array, right? So what it did, it created 1 array like this. It created 1 array like this, right? So inside array, how many elements we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. Since array starts from 0, so ideally this closed should come in 3, and that's what I was doing. But just to show you, I think in the last class what I was doing, I was showing some examples to you, and I matched up this file, right? So when you see here, it has some stupid record somewhere, and let me delete that record for you guys first. Yeah, this one. Okay, so now in this particular case, for this particular array, how many elements we have? Only 1, right? So we have only 0th indexed element. And what I was trying to do, I was trying to access the 3rd element. So it failed. And the array is gone, but it failed. But what I can do, if I remove this and I save this, right? And then if I put here, and then if I uncomment this, so what I'm doing here, I'm creating an array first, right? I'm creating an array. Then I am mapping all the order statuses like complete, comma 1 and everything. And then I'm reducing by key, right? Let's try to run it. It should work fine now. Okay, and the time is running. Let's go to your Scala Spark job here. Okay, so let it run. So let's see, it is still running. So what it is doing behind the scene, after every element, it is picking up this element, right? Closed. It is picking up closed, and it is putting 1. So by what my map function is doing, so first of all, we are splitting, converting this into array. Then we are picking the 3rd element, that is our order status, and we are putting 1 into it after it. So it will put 1 like this, right? Simple. And now let's go here. So okay, so it worked for us. So how many closed were there? So first of all, I filtered the number of closed. Then I created the array using splitting. Then I put some 1, 1, 1, like after every closed. Then I counted number of ones. So it came 58. Now let's go here and refresh this. So it is good. For each is good. And so basically reduce by key is a, so let me do one thing. Let's do one thing quickly. So reduce by key is a narrow transformation. So let's put one broad transformation. Group by key. Okay, group by key is so let's say group by key and stop this. So reduce by key is a narrow transformation. That's where only 1 stage is created. Now let's run this program with one broad transformation, that is your wide transformation. Okay, so the time it is running, let me cover one more quick thing. So Spark architecture, you have number of tasks is equal to number of your actions, right? Number of stages is equal to your number of white transformation. White transformation means shuffling, means when your data needs to move from one partition to another partition, right? And number of jobs, this is most important thing, number of jobs will be equal to number of partitions. Number of partitions, and number of partitions is equal to number of blocks on your HDFS, right? So this is how things work. Let's see if our program is running. So yeah, this is working, and let's do one thing for each. So group by key is a transformation. Group by key is a transformation, right? And that's where it never gave us anything. So to get the result, we need to give for each, we need to give some action, right? So that's where the job is created. So till here, no job is being created because we never touched the action. So here what I'm doing, I'm just running some action just so that we can get the result. So let's see, for each, and we need to have some function. Let's say I want to print it. My function is println. Let me run it again. Okay, still running. Let's go back here. So number of jobs, number of stages, number of tasks are very clear to you guys. You can launch your program in two ways. One is Spark Shell, right? This is called interactive mode. And one is through Spark Submit. Spark Submit will need one jar from you guys. You need to create from the Spark program, right? So this is how it works. Now let's see one more thing. Oh, this is a very good example, this will cover everything in a lot of detail. So what your driver program will have your full program in. So first you will have your Spark context, then you will have some filter, then you map some counting whenever you hit the action, right? Whenever you hit the action here, what it will do, it will request the number of worker executor nodes from the cluster and from the cluster manager. This cluster manager into our case is Yarn, right? This Yarn on behalf of the driver program will create some containers for you guys for the driver, and this container will execute some tasks, right? Each container will run multiple tasks. This task will be number of partition. So let's say we have 100 partitions for that data file on to worker node 1, then we will have 100 tasks here, right? So this is how it works. Now, one more thing, what driver program is doing, it is creating a DAG for you, right? And it is submitting the DAG to the DAG scheduler, and then it is submitting the task which created from the DAG to the task scheduler. Okay, so let's see here if that worked for us. Yeah, perfect. So this worked, right? This works for us. Now let's go here. Let's go here, and let's go here. Still one more thing. I'm just trying to create. Map filter, white transformation. Just one more thing. So let's go here. So it is working actually, and maybe the data is not that enough that it's, in my case, what is going on, this whole data is on single partition because this may be local, and that's where I'm not trying to reproduce that. Even though I'm running a white transformation here, since data is always residing on one partition, that's where it is not going to the other partition. That's when shuffling is not going. So that's maybe Spark is doing some optimization. But to keep it simple, this is the real summary. Task is equal to number of actions. Job is equal to number of partitions. Stage is equal to number of byte transformations, right? And this is how it will work. You will first submit your job to the driver program. Driver program will have your Spark context. A Spark context will be the entry. to the Spark cluster. What Spark context will be doing, it will ask from the cluster manager how many resources it needs. The cluster manager on the driver behalf will create number of executors or number of containers inside those containers. So what container is? Container is nothing, is CPU plus RAM plus some hard disk, something like this. And it will create multiple containers. Inside this container, it will run executors, right? This executor will directly report back to the driver program, right? So what Spark will do, submit the code jar files and configure dependency to the executors for further execution. So this it will do, and the container will report back to the driver program from here, right? So this is how it works. Now let's jump for last 15 minutes about one of the cluster managers. So I'm telling multiple times that we can use any cluster manager, we can use Yarn, but what exactly is Yarn, right? And how exactly Yarn works? So let's jump there. So basically, what is Yarn? So Yarn obviously is a cluster manager, one of the cluster manager, right? So Yarn stands for yet another resource negotiator, and as the name suggests, it negotiates resource on client's behalf, right? So when we talk about any resource negotiation, or whenever we want to run a job, there are two things especially. The first thing is schedule the job, right? The second thing is to monitor the job, right? So you can schedule the job and you need to monitor the job. So what Yarn is doing, so Yarn divided this responsibility into two sections. So Yarn has resource manager. So Yarn has two components actually, resource manager, and inside, so what resource manager is doing? Resource manager is just scheduling the job. It has nothing to do with the jobs, it has nothing to do whether jobs are failing, they are successfully running, what they are doing. It is just running the jobs based on some scheduling criteria. The scheduling criteria means that it can use any Hadoop schedulers. Basically, Hadoop schedulers are further divided into further categories. So basically, it can use FIFO scheduler. As soon, let's say, you submit the first job, it will use the cluster, it will run the job. Once it succeeded, the next job will run. So this is called FIFO scheduler, right? But the FIFO scheduler is good for single tenant if you are the only owner. But there can be other type of scheduler. If your cluster has shared in production or in industry, you are not the only owner of the cluster, right? There are multiple teams using the cluster, and that's where the other kind of scheduler will come, right? Capacity scheduler, like how your job is using capacity. Fair scheduler means every job inside the cluster should have the fair capacity of the resources in the cluster, right? So what Yarn will be doing? Yarn, this component, scheduler component, will use any of the scheduler. What scheduler can be used? It can either use FIFO, it can either use fair scheduler, or it can either use capacity scheduler, right? Capacity scheduler. And this once this job is scheduled, this particular component job is finished. It says, okay, my job is done. Now who is monitoring it, right? Who's monitoring it? So for monitoring, it will create a new component called application master, right? For monitoring. Now, we have two things, scheduling and monitoring. But there's one more important thing, right? There's one more important thing, resource negotiation, right? Scheduling and monitoring is done. But to run the jobs, we need some resources. And what are those resources are? Again, RAM, CPU, it means some containers. We need some container, right? We need some container to run the job. And inside this container, your jobs is running, which your application master will be monitoring, right? Now the question arises, who will be negotiating these containers, right? So whenever you will submit, the client will submit the job, it will go to the resource manager. The resource manager will schedule the job, right? And it will create one application master. It will create one application master on one of the node manager. Node manager is nothing but your data nodes. So see, in very, very simple terms, everything is a daemon or a software which is running on some machine. So behind the scene, everything is physical machine, like laptop. Inside this laptop, there are multiple softwares running, right? Resource manager is one of the software. Node Manager is one of the software, but behind the scene, everything is data node. Data node means a simple machine, right? So when you submit a job to the resource manager, it will do two things. First, it will schedule your job. And the second thing is it will analyze how much resources you need. And to negotiate those resources, it will create one application master on one of the node managers. So let's say it creates this here on node manager 1. Now what this application master will be doing, let's say your job need 5 resources or 5 containers. What this application master will do, it will negotiate. This application master will negotiate those 5 resources from the full resource manager. From the resource manager. So let's say we need 5 resources. Then what resource manager will be doing? Resource manager will say, okay guys, you need 5 containers, right? Let me do it for you. So I'll create 1 container, 2 container, 3, 4, maybe 5 container. And it shares the information to this application master. That okay, now please be quiet. I have created these 5 containers for you. Please be happy. Now it's your responsibility to use this container in your way. I have nothing to do with it. If you want to run movie, you can run movie. If you want to run word count program, it's up to you. So what this application master will do, application master will run some job which client want to run, and then this application master will return back the result to the client. This is how Yarn work. Okay, let's deep dive one step ahead. Okay, so this is Yarn, right? So Yarn, and I'll go one step back. So there were, when Hadoop came in year 2006, right, 2007, there was nothing like Yarn. Yarn is a component of Hadoop MapReduce 2. So now this is nothing to do with Yarn, but I want to cover this section because this is important. So how things were taking place in Hadoop MapReduce 1 or Hadoop version 1. So inside that, obviously, the same thing we need to do. We need to schedule the jobs. We need to track the jobs. We need to monitor the jobs. We need to have some resource negotiation. Same thing needs to be done, right? So the component for that thing is we have job tracker, right, which runs on the name node. So obviously we in SDFS, we have name node data nodes. So we have two components. One is called job tracker and one is called task tracker, right? What job tracker is doing both the things. It is scheduling and it is monitoring. So one thing is very sure, that in Hadoop Yarn, the thing which is distributed across 2 components, and there was a reason behind it. The reason is this job tracker in Hadoop MapReduce 1 sometimes become overwhelmed. Like it has so much things to do that things may slow down, right? Let's say you have 1,000 clients and each client want to run 10 jobs. So in ideal scenario, we have 10,000 jobs. In these 10,000 jobs, you can have 1 million tasks, right? So to do scheduling of this 1 million tasks and do the monitoring of these 1 million tasks, it's a big responsibility for the job tracker, right? So what job tracker was doing in Hadoop MapReduce 1, it is scheduling tasks, and then it creates task tracker to run this 1 million tasks. And this task tracker will be running on your name nodes, data nodes. So when you see here, we have task tracker here, we have job tracker here. Job tracker is doing the scheduling and it will create the task tracker, and task tracker is on data nodes. They will process something and report back to job tracker. What job tracker will do, it will monitor, it will do everything what it needs to do to make sure the job is successful. But here, the major drawback is job tracker is very overwhelmed. And that's the only reason this number of clients or number of nodes cannot be increased beyond 4,000. So it means what it says in Hadoop MapReduce 1, we cannot have cluster more than 4,000 nodes. Why? Because job tracker cannot control anything beyond 4,000 nodes, right? In Hadoop Yarn, what we did, we segregated this responsibility. Scheduling will go to resource manager, monitoring will go to application master. And this is the biggest benefit of Yarn. This responsibility of scheduling and monitoring is segregated, right? And this is where the biggest benefit of Yarn will come in picture, right? One more thing about MapReduce 1 was, in MapReduce 2, what we are doing, we are creating containers. We are creating containers, and this container can be used to run anything. It can be used to run executor in case of Spark. It can be used to run MapReduce. It can be used to run MapTask. It can be used to run reduce task. It can be used to run anything, right? It's just a virtual machine to run something, right? But in case of MapReduce 1, what it says that, okay guys, I have data node 1, and that data node 1 I have task tracker running. Inside this task tracker, I have these many map slots available and these many reduce slots available. I cannot run anything apart from, let's say we have 10 map slots and 10 reduce slots, right? So what it says, I can only run 10 maps and 10 reduce. I cannot run Spark job. I cannot run anything. I can only run MapReduce, and that's only in this much quantity, right? Let's say if we have a task with 19 maps and 1 reduce. So is this particular node is sufficient for this task? Is say no, because I have only 10 maps. Ideally, in ideal world, it should be, because obviously 9 reduced task has emptied here, like 9 reduced slots have been emptied here, because only 1 reduced slot is available, is used, right? But this is the drawback. This is the other drawback, that the map and reduced slots are fixed. They are not be dynamically allocated to other tasks. It can go up to 4,000 nodes. It cannot used for real-time processing. It can only support MapReduce framework. So many things. Job tracker is the single point of failure. It does not support multi-tenancy, right? It can only support MapReduce jobs. It cannot support any other thing, right? And the most important thing, what you can say, that it is not using the cluster in the efficient way, because it is static. It means once it is assigned to map or reduce tasks, it cannot be reuse them even though the slots are idle. The same thing what I explained here. And this is where these guys come up with a new concept of Yarn. And the good part about Yarn was that everything have created in form of container. You can run a MapReduce job here. You can run map job, reduce job, executor for Spark, and even any other computing framework, right? So this Yarn, this particular resource manager has been used as a cluster manager in Spark if we want. And that's where I think most of the industry is using Spark, because they have SDFS behind the scene. So when you have Hadoop MapReduce 2, Yarn is by default installed as a cluster manager or resource manager. And that's where when you run Spark on SDFS, Yarn is available for you by default. And that's where industry is using Yarn, you know. And now you can make sure, and then these executors, right, they're nothing but container. Since we are using Yarn here, these executors were nothing but container. So in Spark terms, we are calling them executors. In MapReduce terms, we can call this container as map and reduce, right? Let's use 2 more minutes of this lecture, how DAG scheduler works and what is a DAG scheduler, right? And how DAG is created behind the scene. So I'll read it through it for you guys, and you guys will totally understand. Whenever you submit a Spark application, Spark can submit application into 2 ways: interactive using Spark shell. The second thing is Spark submit command, right? Then driver module will take the application from the Spark side. So driver will take your code from the Spark side, and driver will perform several tasks on the application. Now, what several tasks it performed? It will perform the task like whether this is RDD, right? Whether this is action, whether this is wide transformation, whether this is narrow transformation, and it will create some DAG, RDD1, RDD2. In this way, it will create some DAG for you, right? Then DAG is converted into physical execution plan. And this is what gone into building a DAG. Now, I already explained the DAG is for the narrow transformation. The narrow transformation is, what is narrow transformation? When you do not need to shuffle data between different partitions like map and filter, right? Wide transformation means reduce by key. in which you may need to reshuffle data. I'm not sure why in my machine it is not working. Maybe because the data is very small. It is in the one partition, but in reduce by key, group by key operation, the new stages will be created. So new stage. So what DAG will be doing, DAG will be dividing the whole code into three ways. It will create a job for each action, stage for each white transformation, and then task for each partition. So this is the most important mapping, right? And you can see that mapping into your, and then once your DAG is created, it will submit your DAG to the DAG scheduler and make sure that physical execution plan is executed, right? So this is how the whole things work behind the scene. For us, it looks like we are just submitting it, but behind the scene, a lot of things have been going on, right? When you press this green button, a lot of things have been going on for you guys. Like Spark is doing a lot of things. It will talk to the cluster manager. It will create the executors. It will run your executor. It will negotiate resources. It will give the result back to the driver, right? One last thing which I miss, and I want to cover it. So the cluster manager, right? One more thing, when we go here into the Spark Summit, so I have covered many things, like your class is your main class, your master is your cluster manager, right? And then deploy mode. Now, one thing is, what is this deploy mode, right? So deploy mode means, so see one thing, when I'm running this code, right? When I'm running this code, I'm running it in my local. So my deploy mode is local, right? Simple. Now, when we go into cluster, so how things work in production works like this. So you have your Spark cluster, or you have your Hadoop cluster like this. Here you have name node, then you have multiple data nodes, right? DN1, DN2, DN3. But in real world, as a developer, you cannot log into this cluster. You cannot, right? So how you access this cluster? You have something called edge node, or we can call this node as gateway node. So gateway node is gateway to the cluster. The cluster can be anything, Spark cluster, Hadoop cluster, anything, right? So what you do, you log into your edge node, and inside this edge node, the connectivity between cluster and this is set up by your administrator. You do not need to worry about it. So you run Spark Submit here, right? Spark Submit here. So now the thing is, Spark Submit has two things, right? Where your driver is running now. The question is where your driver will run. One thing is very sure, your executor will always run on cluster. But your driver can run, because what is driver actually? Driver is nothing but your main class, right? Your Spark context. It's a very, very small program. So what Spark guy says, or Spark researcher says, you can run your driver either on client machine. So edge node is nothing but the client machine from where you access the cluster, or you can run your Spark onto the cluster machine, right? So when you run your Spark program, with deploy mode is equal to client, you can have the deploy mode as client or cluster, right? So when you use client here, it means all the result will come to the client machine. If you run to the cluster mode, all the result will go to the cluster machine. Now the question arises, where we need to use the client mode and where we need to use the cluster mode. I think the answer is very simple. When you are doing debugging, when you need to see some results on your console onto the client machine, you will go for client mode. The drawback of client mode is, see, this particular edge node, right? This can fail. So if see, driver is a single point of entry to the Spark cluster. Your program is like your main class is driver. If driver fails, everything fails. So if this machine crashes, your job fail, right? And that's where we don't want to run any production job into the client mode. We always run our production job into cluster mode, because this cluster is more reliable, more fault tolerant. So we will use client mode when we want to do some testing. Once testing is done, we have seen the result onto this machine. So let's say we are running in client mode, right? So all the result will come here and we can see the result. If we feel good, then we can change this mode to cluster and we'll run it on cluster. In cluster mode, the driver can run on any of the node. Let's say here or here, somewhere. It is not in your control. The cluster will take care on your behalf. So this is the difference between client and cluster mode. Okay. So we have covered almost everything. So we have class, master, deploy, configuration, and application jar. And then we can pass them. So this configuration I'll cover later. So this is nothing to do with your executor memory or something, but I'll cover them later. But this is the most important thing when you talk about Spark Summit. Okay. So this is all for today, guys.